Running Cloud's tomahawks dripped with bandit blood as his tribal elders delivered their merciless ultimatum: abandon the White Widow and her 4 terrified children to certain death, or be forever banished from the only home he'd ever known. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The dawn light crept across the arid Arizona landscape, painting the distant mountains in shades of amber and gold as Running Cloud moved silently through the tall grass. His moccasins barely disturbed the earth beneath him, each step placed with the practiced precision of a man who had learned to become one with the land that sustained him. The air still held the night's coolness, but he knew the merciless summer sun would soon reclaim its dominion, baking the earth until it cracked like the face of an elder who had seen too many seasons. At 32 winters, Running Cloud had earned his place among the most respected warriors of the Chiricahua Apache. The scars that marked his copper skin told stories of battles fought and hunts that had fed his people through harsh winters. His dark eyes, ever watchful, scanned the horizon as he patrolled the eastern boundaries of his tribe's hunting grounds. These lands had sustained his people for generations, but with each passing season, more white settlers encroached upon territories that had once belonged solely to the Apache and the wild creatures that roamed the valleys. He paused atop a rocky outcropping, his gaze drawn to a thin plume of smoke rising in the distance. It was too early for cooking fires, and the smoke was too black, too thick. Something was burning that was not meant to burn. His muscles tensed as he adjusted the twin tomahawks secured at his waist. The weapons had been crafted by his father's hands and had tasted the blood of both men and beasts. They were extensions of his own limbs, balanced perfectly for his grip. Running Cloud descended the slope with swift, sure movements, driven by a sense of foreboding that tightened his chest. The elders spoke often of the importance of reading the signs that the world revealed to those patient enough to observe. This smoke was a sign, one that promised nothing good. As he drew closer, the acrid scent of burning wood and canvas filled his nostrils. Then came the sounds, the harsh crack of gunfire, panicked screams, and beneath it all, the high-pitched wails of children. Running Cloud's pace quickened, his heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum. He crouched at the edge of a small ravine, taking in the scene below with a warrior's calculating gaze. A settler wagon train, 3 wagons in all, had been ambushed. 2 were already engulfed in flames, their white canvas coverings blackened and collapsing as the wooden frames beneath them surrendered to the fire. Bodies lay scattered on the ground, men in the rough clothing of frontier settlers, their blood darkening the thirsty earth. But it was the 3rd wagon that drew his attention. A woman with hair the color of wheat stood defiantly before it, a rifle clutched in trembling hands. Behind her, partially hidden by the wagon's half-lowered tailgate, huddled 4 children of varying ages, their faces pale with terror. Surrounding them were 5 men on horseback, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats, bandanas pulled up to conceal all but their eyes that gleamed with cruel amusement as they circled their prey. Bandits, not soldiers, not settlers seeking land. These were men who lived by taking what others had built, leaving only blood and ashes in their wake. "Ain't no need to make this harder than it has to be, Ma'am," one of the men called out, his voice a lazy drawl that did nothing to disguise the menace beneath. "Just set down that rifle and we'll make it quick for you. Might even let the little ones live if they're useful." The woman's response was to steady her aim, though Running Cloud could see the barrel of her rifle wavering slightly. "Come closer and find out how quick it'll be," she replied, her voice cracking but determined. The leader of the bandits laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Feisty one, ain't you, boys? I think we got ourselves some entertainment before we—" He never finished his sentence. Running Cloud's decision was made in an instant, driven not by the careful deliberation valued by his people's council, but by something deeper, more primal. The first tomahawk flew from his hand with deadly accuracy, finding its home in the back of the bandit furthest from the leader. The man toppled from his horse without a sound, dead before he hit the ground. Chaos erupted as Running Cloud burst from his hiding place, his war cry splitting the air like thunder. The remaining bandits wheeled their horses around, momentarily confused by this unexpected attack from behind. It was all the advantage he needed. His second tomahawk claimed another life as he sprinted toward the nearest horse, leaping with the grace of a mountain lion to pull its rider to the ground. The woman, seizing the moment of confusion, fired her rifle. The shot went wide, but it was enough to send one of the horses rearing in panic, throwing its rider to the ground. "Mama!" one of the children cried out. "Behind you!" Running Cloud turned to see the bandit leader dismounting, drawing a wicked-looking knife from his belt as he advanced on the woman, who was frantically trying to reload her weapon. The Apache warrior reached for the knife at his own belt, knowing he wouldn't reach them in time to prevent the attack. But then the unexpected happened. The oldest child, a boy no more than 10 winters, emerged from behind the wagon with a burning branch clutched in his small hands. With a courage that belied his years, he charged at the bandit leader, swinging the flaming wood like a sword. The distraction was enough. The leader turned, his face twisted with rage at this child's defiance. "You little," he snarled, but his words were cut short as Running Cloud's knife found its mark, embedding itself deep in the man's shoulder. The bandit howled in pain, staggering backward as Running Cloud closed the distance between them. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader wounded and 2 of their companions already dead, lost their appetite for the fight. They scrambled for their horses, firing wildly as they retreated. Running Cloud recovered his weapons from the fallen, wiping the blood on the grass before returning them to his belt. Only then did he turn to face the woman and her children, who huddled together, watching him with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice steadier now that the immediate danger had passed. Her eyes, the color of the summer sky, were wary but direct as she assessed him. "We owe you our lives." Running Cloud nodded once, his expression remaining impassive despite the turmoil within. He had killed men to save white settlers, people his tribe viewed as invaders. Yet looking at the children, their faces smudged with dirt and tears, he could not regret his actions. "My name is Sarah McAllister," the woman continued, lowering her rifle but not setting it aside. "These are my children, James, Emma, Daniel, and little Abigail." The eldest boy, the one who had shown such bravery, stepped forward slightly. "Are you an Indian chief?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. Despite himself, Running Cloud felt his lips twitch in the ghost of a smile. "I am Running Cloud of the Chiricahua Apache," he replied in English, learned from traders and captives. His words were careful, measured, each one chosen with precision. "Not chief, warrior." "A warrior," James repeated, clearly impressed. "You saved us. Those men." "They killed everyone." His voice broke, and he looked back at his mother, suddenly a child again rather than the defender he had tried to be. Sarah placed a hand on her son's shoulder, drawing him back to her side. "We were traveling to meet my brother in Santa Fe," she explained, her voice tight with contained emotion. "My husband, he passed from pneumonia last winter. We had nowhere left in Boston, so we joined this wagon train west." She gestured to the burning wagons, the bodies on the ground. "These good people took us in, and now..." Running Cloud surveyed the scene. The bandits had taken the horses and anything of value. The wagons were beyond saving. The nearest white settlement was at least 2 days' journey, And these people, a woman and 4 young children, would never survive alone in this territory, especially with bandits possibly returning. "What will you do now?" he asked. Already knowing there was no good answer she could give, Sarah looked at her children, then at the desolate landscape around them. The youngest girl, barely old enough to walk, clung to her mother's skirts, thumb firmly planted in her mouth. The middle children, a boy and girl who appeared to be twins of perhaps 6 or 7 years, stood close together, their eyes never leaving Running Cloud. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly. "And we can't stay here, but we have no horse, no wagon." She trailed off, the impossibility of their situation hanging in the air between them. Running Cloud knew what the wise choice would be, to leave these settlers to their fate. It was not his responsibility to save those who had come uninvited to lands that had belonged to his people since before memory. Yet as he watched the smallest child toddle over to her mother, arms raised in silent plea to be held, he found he could not simply walk away. "My people's village is 1 day's journey from here," he said finally. "You will come with me. There will be food, shelter." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Your village, but will your people accept us?" It was a valid question, and one to which Running Cloud had no certain answer. The Chiricahua had suffered greatly at the hands of white soldiers and settlers. Many in his tribe would view his decision to bring these people to their camp as a betrayal, perhaps even a danger, and yet, to leave this woman and her children to die would be to become the very thing his people despised about the white man, cruel, without honor. "We will see," was all he said. Then, with a gesture toward the east, "We must leave now. More bandits may come. Can the children walk?" Sarah straightened her shoulders, gathering her dignity around her like a cloak. "We McAllisters are stronger than we look. My children can walk, and so can I." She hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you, Running Cloud. I won't forget this kindness." Running Cloud turned away, uncomfortable with her gratitude. This was not kindness, he told himself. It was simply what honor demanded. Yet as they began their journey, the smallest child reaching trustingly for his hand, he wondered if the Council of Elders would see it the same way. They traveled east, away from the smoldering remains of the wagon train and the bodies Running Cloud had insisted they leave behind. "The earth will claim them," he had said when Sarah asked about burial. "Adim, we cannot delay." His words were few but firm, brooking no argument, and Sarah McAllister, though raised with different customs, recognized the wisdom in his urgency. The terrain grew increasingly difficult as the day progressed, rocky outcroppings giving way to steep slopes dotted with scrub brush and cacti. The sun climbed mercilessly in the cloudless sky, its heat bearing down upon them like a physical weight. Running Cloud set a pace that was challenging but not impossible, pausing regularly to allow the children to rest in whatever shade they could find. Little Abigail, not yet 3, had been carried most of the way by her mother, but even Sarah's considerable determination could not overcome the limits of physical endurance. Running Cloud observed her faltering steps, the way she shifted the child from one hip to another, the tightness around her eyes that spoke of exhaustion she would not admit to. "I will carry the small one," he said, not as an offer, but as a statement of fact. Sarah hesitated, her maternal instinct warring with pragmatism. Abigail, sensing her mother's uncertainty, buried her face in Sarah's neck, blonde curls damp with sweat. "Oh, she is not used to strangers," Sarah explained, though the fatigue in her voice made it clear she was reaching her limit. Running Cloud did not argue. Instead, he knelt to the ground before the twins, Daniel and Emma, who had been trudging along in exhausted silence. From a pouch at his waist, he withdrew a handful of dried berries. "For strength," he said, offering them to the children. The twins looked to their mother for permission, and when Sarah nodded, they accepted the unexpected gift with shy thanks. Then Running Cloud turned his attention to James, the eldest, who had been walking slightly apart. His young shoulders squared in an attempt to emulate the warrior's stoic bearing. "You fought bravely," Running Cloud told him, his voice low enough that only the boy could hear. "A warrior must know when to rest so he can fight again tomorrow." James's chest swelled visibly at being addressed as a warrior, and some of the haunted look left his eyes. "I'm not tired," he insisted, though the shadows beneath his eyes told a different story. "Then you will help me," Running Cloud replied. "Your eyes are sharp. Watch for snakes on the path." It was a simple trick, giving the boy a task to focus on rather than his fatigue, but an effective one. As they resumed their journey, James moved ahead slightly, his gaze scanning the ground with newfound purpose. They stopped at midday, when the sun was at its zenith, finding shelter in the shadow of a towering rock formation. Running Cloud produced a water skin and rationed it carefully among them. The water was tepid but clean, and Sarah closed her eyes in momentary bliss as she swallowed. "How much further?" she asked, watching as Emma helped little Abigail drink without spilling. "We will reach my people's camp when the sun touches the western mountains," Running Cloud answered, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "There is a stream not far ahead. We will rest there longer." "And your people," Sarah began, then faltered, unsure how to phrase her concern. Running Cloud turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You are thinking they will not welcome you?" "Yes," she admitted. "I understand we are unexpected, unwelcome, perhaps. A ghost of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps respect, flickered across his features. "You speak truth." "That is good." He adjusted one of his tomahawks, a gesture Sarah had noticed he made when considering his words carefully. "My people have suffered at the hands of the white man. Soldiers have burned our crops, driven us from our hunting grounds. Settlers take land without asking. Each year, we are pushed further into the mountains, away from the valleys where our ancestors lived." Sarah absorbed this, her face solemn. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I can't speak for others of my kind, only for myself and my children. We mean no harm to your people." Running Cloud studied her face, as if searching for deceit and finding none. "I believe you, but many in my tribe will not. They will see only your white skin and remember their pain." "Then why bring us to your village?" Sarah asked. "Why not leave us at the wagon train?" "To die?" Running Cloud shook his head. "That would make me no better than those who attacked you." He stood, signaling the end of their rest. "Come, the stream awaits." As promised, they reached a small creek an hour later, its water running clear and cool over smooth stones. The children's spirits lifted immediately at the sight of it, and even Sarah felt renewed energy flow through her tired limbs. Running Cloud allowed them time to drink their fill and wash the dust from their faces and hands. It was here, in this moment of relative peace, that the smallest barrier between them fell. Abigail, overcoming her initial shyness, approached Running Cloud as he knelt by the water's edge, sharpening one of his knives on a flat stone. Without warning, the child plopped down beside him, her tiny fingers reaching out to touch the colorful beadwork on his leather vest. "Pretty," she declared, looking up at him with the innocent directness of the very young. Running Cloud froze, knife suspended mid-motion. For a heartbeat, Sarah feared she had overstepped some boundary, but then the warrior's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Do these tell stories?" he told Abigail, indicating the intricate patterns of beads. "This one means swift like the wind. This one, silent as shadow." Abigail nodded solemnly, as if she understood perfectly. then pointed to a circle of red beads near his shoulder. "What's that one?" "That means protector," he replied, and for the first time since they had met, Sarah saw him truly smile. A small thing, quickly hidden but genuine nonetheless. The moment was brief, but significant. As they resumed their journey, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in their dynamic. The children stayed closer to Running Cloud, occasionally asking questions that he answered with unexpected patience. James, in particular, seemed drawn to the warrior, watching his every move with undisguised admiration. When the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Running Cloud led them up a narrow, winding path that cut through dense stands of juniper. At the top of a rise, he stopped, gesturing for them to join him. Below stretched a small valley, and nestled within it, the Apache camp, a collection of wickiups arranged in a loose circle, smoke rising from cooking fires, figures moving about in the day's fading light. It was smaller than Sarah had imagined, perhaps 30 dwellings in all, but it radiated a sense of order and purpose that spoke of a people deeply connected to their way of life. "My home," Running Cloud said simply. Then, with a glance at Sarah and her children, "For tonight, your home as well." They descended toward the camp, and Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. She straightened her shoulders, gathered her children close, and followed Running Cloud toward the unknown reception that awaited them. Their approach did not go unnoticed. A shout went up from the perimeter of the camp, and within moments, warriors emerged from between the wickiups, bows drawn and spears at the ready. Children who had been playing in the dirt scattered like startled quail, disappearing into dwellings as women hurried to gather them. The camp transformed from peaceful evening routine to defensive posture in the space of a heartbeat. Sarah instinctively pulled her children closer, placing herself between them and the advancing warriors. James stood tall beside her, his thin chest puffed out in a show of courage that broke her heart even as it filled her with fierce pride. Running Cloud raised his hand in a gesture of peace, calling out words in his native tongue. The warriors hesitated but did not lower their weapons. An older man pushed through the gathering crowd, tall and lean, with deep lines etched into his face and gray streaking his long hair. Authority emanated from him like heat from fire. "Grey Wolf," Running Cloud greeted him in English, for Sarah's benefit. "I return to our people." "So I see," the elder replied, his gaze sliding past Running Cloud to rest on Sarah and her children. His eyes, black as obsidian, revealed nothing of his thoughts. "And you bring strangers to our home, white strangers." The way he said white made it sound like a disease, and Sarah felt a chill despite the lingering warmth of the day. Emma pressed against her skirts, and Daniel gripped her hand so tightly her fingers ached. "They were attacked by bandits," Running Cloud explained. "All others in their party were killed. I could not leave them to die." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Another warrior stepped forward, younger than Grey Wolf, but older than Running Cloud, with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. "Since when do we concern ourselves with the fate of settlers?" he demanded, spitting the last word like a curse. "They would not do the same for us." "I am not them, Swift Arrow," Running Cloud replied evenly, "and I do not measure my honor against the actions of others." Swift Arrow's face darkened with anger. "You bring danger to our doorstep, brother. The white man's law will come looking for these people." "And find what?" Running Cloud countered. "That we sheltered those in need, that we did not turn away children who faced death in the desert." "Enough." Grey Wolf's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He approached Sarah slowly, his gaze traveling from her face to each of her children in turn. When he reached Abigail, who was now clutched tightly in her mother's arms, something in his stern countenance softened almost imperceptibly. "What is your name, woman?" he asked. "Sarah McAllister," she replied, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. "These are my children, James, Emma, Daniel, and Abigail." She swallowed hard, then added, "We are in your debt, sir." Without Running Cloud, we would be dead now. Grey Wolf regarded her silently for a long moment. "Many of my people would say that would have been better for us all," he said finally. "But what is done is done." He turned back to Running Cloud. "The council will meet tonight to decide what happens now. Until then, they may shelter in your wickiup." He spoke a few sharp words in Apache, and the warriors reluctantly lowered their weapons, though their eyes remained wary and hostile. The crowd began to disperse, women herding curious children away, men returning to their tasks with backward glances and muttered comments Sarah could not understand, but whose meaning was clear enough. "And come," Running Cloud said quietly, leading them toward a dwelling on the eastern edge of the camp. As they walked, Sarah felt the weight of dozens of stares, some merely curious, others openly hostile. One woman, grinding corn between two stones, stopped her work to spit on the ground as they passed. But there were a very few, whose eyes held something different. An elderly woman nodded slightly as they walked by. A young mother, a baby tied to her back, offered what might have been a sympathetic glance. Running Cloud's dwelling was simple but neat, a domed structure covered with animal hides and brush, with a smoke hole at the top. Inside, a central fire pit was ringed with stones, and furs and woven mats covered the packed earth floor. Weapons and tools hung from the supporting poles, alongside dried herbs and small pouches that Sarah assumed contained personal belongings. "You will stay here," Running Cloud told them, gesturing for them to sit. "I must speak with the council." "What will happen to us?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the worry from her voice. Running Cloud's expression was grim. "I do not know. The elders remember too well the broken treaties, the stolen lands. They fear what your presence here may bring. We won't stay long," Sarah assured him. "Once we've rested, perhaps you could guide us to the nearest settlement." "Perhaps," he replied, though something in his tone suggested he did not believe it would be so simple. "There is food here." He indicated a clay pot and some dried meat wrapped in leaves. "And water." A water skin hung from one of the poles. "Rest now. The children are tired." Indeed, the younger ones were already drooping with exhaustion, the excitement and fear of the day catching up with them. Even James's eyelids were heavy, though he fought to remain alert. "Thank you," Sarah said, the words feeling woefully inadequate for all he had done. "Whatever happens, thank you for today." Running Cloud nodded once, then ducked out of the wickiup, leaving them alone in the gathering darkness. Outside, they could hear the camp coming back to life. Voices, the clatter of cooking implements, the rhythmic pounding of something being crushed or ground, ordinary sounds of a community preparing for evening, yet to Sarah's ears, they seemed alien and foreboding. She helped her children settle onto the soft furs, murmuring reassurances as she tucked them in as best she could. Only when they had finally succumbed to sleep did she allow her own composure to falter, a single tear tracking down her cheek as she wondered what fate awaited them in this place, so far from everything she had ever known. The council fire cast long shadows across the faces of the elders as they gathered in a tight circle, their expressions solemn beneath the star-scattered sky. Running Cloud stood before them, his posture straight and proud despite the weight of their collective scrutiny. Around them, the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes, the soft rustle of wind through juniper, seemed to hold their breath, waiting. Grey Wolf sat directly across from Running Cloud, his weathered hands resting on his knees. To his right sat Morning Sky, the oldest woman of the tribe, her blind eyes milky with age, but her mind still sharp as flint. To his left was Bear Killer, a warrior whose legendary strength was matched only by his stubborn adherence to tradition. The other council members, 5 in all, completed the circle, each face illuminated by the dancing flames. Swift Arrow was not part of the council, but he had been granted permission to speak. He stood now to the side, his scarred face twisted with barely contained anger. "Running Cloud has always been respected among us," Grey Wolf began, his voice carrying the weight of his authority. "His courage in battle, his skill in the hunt, these things are not in question. But today he has brought strangers to our home, white strangers." He looked directly at Running Cloud. "Speak now, and tell us why we should not send them away at first light." Running Cloud took a deep breath, choosing his words with care. The woman and her children were attacked by bandits, men with no honor, who prey on the weak. All others in their party were killed. They had no horses, no water, no protection from the sun or from those who would harm them. He paused, meeting each elder's gaze in turn. "To leave them would have been to sentence them to death. And why should that concern us?" Bear Killer demanded, leaning forward. "How many of our people have died at the hands of the white man? How many of our children have been left motherless, fatherless? The settlers push us from our lands, the soldiers hunt us like animals, and you bring their kind into our midst." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the circle. Running Cloud had anticipated this reaction, yet it still kindled a spark of frustration within him. "The woman is not a soldier," he replied evenly. "Her children are not those who signed false treaties or fired rifles at our people. They are simply a family who lost their path." "All white settlers are the same," Swift Arrow interjected from his position at the edge of the circle. "Today they need our help. Tomorrow they bring others to take what is ours." Morning Sky raised a gnarled hand, and immediate silence fell. When she spoke, her voice was like dry leaves rustling. "I have lived long enough to see much suffering. I have seen our people pushed from valley to mountain, from river to desert. I have buried children killed by white men's diseases and white men's bullets." She tilted her head, as though listening to voices only she could hear. "But I have also seen cruelty and kindness in all people, regardless of the color of their skin." She turned her sightless eyes toward Running Cloud. "Tell me, young warrior, what do you see in this woman's heart?" It was a question that cut to the core of the matter, one that Running Cloud had asked himself repeatedly since the moment he had decided to intervene at the wagon train. What had he seen in Sarah McAllister that had compelled him to act against the interests of his own people? "I see a mother who would die to protect her children," he answered finally. "I see courage in the face of despair. I see truth." He straightened his shoulders. "She does not pretend to be what she is not. She understands that she is unwelcome here, yet she faces that with dignity." "Pretty words," Bear Killer grunted. "But they do not change the danger she brings to us." "What danger?" Running Cloud challenged. "She has no weapon but an empty rifle. No allies but her children. The nearest white settlement is many days' journey from here." "And when other white men come looking for her," Swift Arrow demanded, "what then?" "They will not come," Running Cloud insisted. "The bandits who attacked her party will have scattered the horses, taken anything of value. There will be nothing left to find but bones and ashes. No one will know what became of Sarah McAllister and her children." Grey Wolf had been silent, listening to the exchange with thoughtful eyes. Now he spoke again. "And what do you propose we do with these strangers, Running Cloud? Would you have us adopt them into our tribe, teach them our ways? Make them Apache?" There was no mockery in his tone, only a genuine question. Running Cloud hesitated. He had not thought beyond the immediate need to save their lives. I ask only that we shelter them until they are strong enough to travel. Then I will guide them to a place where their own kind will take them in." "And if we refuse?" Grey Wolf asked quietly. "But if we say they must leave at dawn?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Running Cloud knew what Grey Wolf was truly asking. Where did his loyalty lie? With his tribe, or with the strangers he had saved? "Then I will go with them," he replied, the words falling from his lips before he had fully formed the thought. Yet as soon as they were spoken, he knew they were true. "I cannot leave them to die, even if it means leaving my people." A shocked silence fell over the council. Such a declaration was unprecedented. To choose outsiders over one's own tribe was almost unthinkable. "You would abandon your people for these whites?" Bear Killer's voice was incredulous. "I would honor the warrior's path as I understand it," Running Cloud answered steadily. "And if that path leads away from my people, then I will walk it with sadness in my heart, but I will walk it nonetheless." Grey Wolf studied him for a long moment, the firelight deepening the lines on his face. "The council will consider your words," he said finally. "Until we decide, the woman and her children may remain in your wickiup. But they are your responsibility." Running Cloud. "Any trouble they bring will fall upon your shoulders." Running Cloud bowed his head in acknowledgement, understanding that this was the most he could hope for at present. As he turned to leave the council circle, he caught Swift Arrow's gaze, cold, calculating, and filled with a promise of opposition that sent a chill down his spine despite the warmth of the fire. Sarah sat by the small fire in Running Cloud's wickiup, her fingers mechanically stroking Emma's hair as the child slept with her head in her mother's lap. The other children were sprawled on the furs, their faces peaceful in sleep despite the uncertainty that surrounded them. Only James remained awake, sitting cross-legged by the entrance, his young face set in lines of determination as he kept watch like a miniature sentry. "And you should sleep too," Sarah told him softly. "You're exhausted." James shook his head. "I'm waiting for him to come back." There was no need to specify who him was. Running Cloud had become, in the space of a day, the center of their fragile world. Sarah sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her son's jaw, a mirror of his father's determination. Thomas McAllister had worn that same expression when he announced they would head west after losing their home in Boston, and again when the fever took hold and he insisted he would recover. Her throat tightened at the memory. "I wonder what they're saying," James murmured, peering out into the darkness toward the council fire, visible only as a distant glow. "But do you think they'll make us leave?" Before Sarah could formulate a reassuring answer, the hide covering the entrance was pushed aside and Running Cloud ducked into the wickiup. The lines around his eyes were deeper than before, his expression guarded. James scrambled to his feet. "What did they say? Can we stay?" Running Cloud regarded the boy for a moment, then glanced at Sarah. "For now," he replied. "The council has not reached a final decision," Sarah read between the lines, "but they're leaning towards sending us away, aren't they?" Running Cloud settled himself by the fire, laying his tomahawks carefully at his side. "There is division. Some fear what your presence here might bring." "We understand," Sarah said, though her heart sank at the confirmation of what she had suspected. "We're grateful for even one night of safety." Running Cloud looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I told them I would guide you to a white settlement if they decide you must leave." "That's very kind," Sarah began, but Running Cloud shook his head. "There is more," he said. "I told them that if they force you to leave before you are ready to travel safely, I will go with you. Not just as a guide, but to ensure you reach your destination." Sarah stared at him, momentarily speechless. The implications of his words slowly dawned on her. He was willing to leave his people, his home, for them. Strangers he had met only hours ago. "You can't do that," she said finally. "We've already taken too much from you." "It is my choice," Running Cloud replied simply. James had been listening intently, his eyes wide. "You'd leave your tribe for us? Why?" Running Cloud considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "A warrior must follow the path of honor, even when it is difficult," he said at last. "To abandon those in need is to abandon one's own heart." The simplicity of his answer, delivered without drama or expectation of gratitude, made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting to embarrass him with an emotional display. "We'll be gone at first light," she promised. "We won't be the cause of you losing your home." Running Cloud shook his head. "The desert is no place for children to travel without preparation. You will stay until you are stronger, until we have supplies." His tone brooked no argument. James had moved closer to Running Cloud, his admiration for the warrior evident in every line of his body. "Could you teach me to throw a tomahawk while we're here?" "James," Sarah began, embarrassed by her son's forwardness. But Running Cloud's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Perhaps," he replied. "Now sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." As if his words had conjured it, a commotion arose outside. Raised voices, the rapid patter of feet on packed earth. Running Cloud was on his feet in an instant, weapons in hand, positioning himself between the entrance and Sarah's family. The hide covering was thrust aside, and an elderly woman appeared, her face creased with urgency. She spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing toward the center of the camp. Running Cloud's expression darkened. "Stay here," he told Sarah. "Do not leave this wiki up unless I return for you." "What's happening?" Sarah asked, fear clutching at her heart as she gathered her sleeping children closer. "White men," Running Cloud replied grimly. "Soldiers. They have come to the edge of our territory." "Soldiers?" Sarah echoed, confused. "But how could they know we're here?" Running Cloud's eyes were flint-hard in the firelight. "They do not. This is something else." He turned to the old woman, exchanging a few more words before she disappeared back into the night. "I must go to the council," he told Sarah. "The soldiers have set up camp not far from here. They sent a scout with a message demanding to speak with our leaders at dawn." "What do they want?" James asked, his voice small. Running Cloud's expression was grim. "They always want the same thing, young one. More land, more concessions, more of what is not theirs to take." He moved to the entrance, then paused, looking back at them. "Whatever happens, remember my promise. I will not abandon you." With that, he was gone, leaving Sarah and James staring at each other in the flickering firelight, the sleeping children blissfully unaware of this new threat to their precarious sanctuary. Dawn broke over the Apache camp with a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah had barely slept, keeping vigil by the fire while her children tossed restlessly on their makeshift beds. Running Cloud had not returned during the night, and the sounds from outside, hurried footsteps, urgent voices, the occasional clash of weapons being readied, did nothing to ease her growing anxiety. James was the first of her children to wake, rubbing sleep from his eyes as he immediately looked for Running Cloud. Finding the wiki up empty, save for his family, his shoulders slumped with disappointment. "He's still with the council," Sarah explained, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "Important matters take time to discuss." Emma stirred next, followed by Daniel. Only Abigail continued to sleep, her thumb lodged firmly in her mouth, blissfully unaware of the precarious situation surrounding them. "I'm hungry, Mama," Emma whispered, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might draw unwanted attention. Sarah reached for the supplies Running Cloud had left them, breaking off pieces of dried meat and flatbread. It wasn't the breakfast her children were accustomed to, but they ate without complaint, understanding on some instinctive level that this was not a time for childish protests. As they ate, the hide covering the entrance was suddenly drawn back, and Sarah tensed, pulling her children closer. But it wasn't Running Cloud who entered. It was the elderly woman who had come with news of the soldiers the night before. Up close, Sarah could see that, despite her age, the woman's eyes were bright with intelligence, and her movements, though slow, were purposeful. She carried a small clay pot in her gnarled hands, and the aroma that wafted from it made Sarah's stomach growl involuntarily. "Morning sky," the woman said, tapping her chest with one finger, then gesturing to the pot. "Food." Sarah recognized the name. Running Cloud had mentioned her as one of the respected elders of the tribe. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the offering with both hands. "I'm Sarah. These are my children." Morning Sky nodded, her gaze lingering on each child in turn. When she looked at Abigail, still sleeping, a smile softened her weathered features. She spoke a few words in Apache, then made a cradling motion with her arms. "I think she's saying your baby is beautiful," James translated, his time spent listening to Running Cloud already paying dividends. Sarah smiled, the simple human connection momentarily bridging the vast cultural divide between them. "Day, please, will you sit?" she offered, gesturing to the space across from her. Morning Sky settled herself by the fire with the fluid grace of one who had performed the action thousands of times. She watched as Sarah distributed the stew among her children, who dug in with enthusiasm. "Running Cloud?" Sarah asked, making a questioning gesture. Morning Sky's expression grew somber. She pointed toward the eastern edge of the camp, then made a gesture that Sarah interpreted as talking or arguing. The message was clear enough. Running Cloud was still in council, and the discussions were not going smoothly. Sarah nodded her understanding, worry gnawing at her insides. She wanted to ask about the soldiers, about what would happen to them, but the language barrier made anything beyond simple communication impossible. As if sensing her thoughts, Morning Sky reached out and patted Sarah's hand. The old woman's skin was like parchment, dry and thin, but there was surprising strength in her touch. She spoke again, her tone gentle but firm. "I don't understand," Sarah admitted helplessly. Morning Sky frowned in concentration, then tried again, this time including gestures that mimed walking, then sleeping, then walking again. "Journey," Sarah guessed. "A long journey?" Morning Sky nodded emphatically, then pointed to Sarah, her children, and finally in the direction she had indicated Running Cloud was. "We're leaving?" Sarah asked, her heart sinking. "All of us?" Before Morning Sky could respond, the hide covering was pushed aside again, and Running Cloud entered, followed by Grey Wolf. Both men looked exhausted, their faces lined with the aftermath of what had clearly been a long and difficult night. "Sarah McAllister," Grey Wolf addressed her directly, his English accented but clear. "The soldiers who camp at our borders bring trouble, as they always do. They speak of a new treaty, new boundaries for our people." His mouth twisted on the word treaty, as if it tasted bitter. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, though she knew the words were inadequate for the centuries of broken promises his people had endured. Grey Wolf acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "In light of this new danger, the Council has reached a decision regarding you and your children." Sarah steeled herself, instinctively drawing her children closer. "We understand if we must leave." "We're grateful for the shelter you've provided." Grey Wolf exchanged a glance with Running Cloud, whose expression remained carefully neutral. "The decision is this. You cannot stay in our camp. The presence of white settlers, even innocent ones, would give the soldiers an excuse to enter our territory. I understand, Sarah began, but Grey Wolf raised a hand to indicate he hadn't finished. However, he continued, sending you out alone would be dishonorable. He seemed to choose the word with care. Running Cloud has offered a solution. There is a place, a day's journey from here, a small cabin built by our people for trading with those few whites we trust. It is remote, hidden from the usual paths. He suggests you shelter there while he negotiates with the soldiers. Sarah looked at Running Cloud, whose eyes met hers steadily. "But you would do this for us?" she asked softly. "I have given my word," he replied simply. "The council does not agree unanimously," Grey Wolf added, a note of warning in his voice. "Some believe any association with whites brings danger, but Morning Sky has spoken in your favor, and her wisdom carries great weight among us." Sarah looked at the old woman with newfound gratitude, understanding now why she had come. Morning Sky smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "You will leave before midday," Grey Wolf concluded. "Running Cloud will guide you. What happens after the soldiers depart, that will be decided later." As Grey Wolf turned to leave, Running Cloud spoke again. "There is one more thing. Swift Arrow has volunteered to accompany us." Something in his tone made Sarah glance sharply at him. The subtle tension in his jaw told her this was not a welcome development. "For protection," Grey Wolf explained, though his expression suggested he understood Running Cloud's reservations. "Two warriors are better than one in dangerous times." After they had gone, Sarah turned to Running Cloud, questions burning on her lips. But he shook his head slightly. "Prepare your children," he said quietly. "We leave soon." They left the Apache camp as the sun reached its zenith, a small procession that drew the eyes of every tribal member. Running Cloud led the way, a pack containing provisions slung over one shoulder, his weapons ready at his belt. Sarah followed with Abigail in her arms, the child's blonde curls glinting in the sunlight. James, Emma, and Daniel walked close behind their mother, wide-eyed but silent, understanding the gravity of their situation. Swift Arrow brought up the rear, his scarred face set in a permanent scowl, a rifle, clearly taken from some unfortunate settler, clutched in his hands. As they passed the last wickiup, Morning Sky appeared, her ancient hand raised in what Sarah took to be a blessing. The old woman's milky eyes seemed to see beyond the physical world, and Sarah felt a strange comfort in her presence, brief though it was. Several children ran alongside them for a short distance, curiosity overcoming their wariness of the white strangers. One little girl, no more than 5, darted forward to press something into Emma's hand before scampering away. Emma opened her palm to reveal a small clay bead painted with a zigzag pattern. "A gift," Running Cloud explained, noting Emma's confusion. "For safe journey." Emma closed her fingers around the bead carefully, a smile brightening her tired face. It was the first gift she had received since leaving Boston, and its simplicity made it all the more precious. The path Running Cloud chose led them away from the direction of the soldiers' camp, cutting instead through a narrow canyon before climbing steadily into more rugged terrain. The summer heat was merciless, bearing down on them like a physical weight, but Running Cloud set a pace that accounted for the children's shorter legs and less hardy constitutions. Swift Arrow made no effort to hide his impatience, muttering in Apache whenever they paused to rest or drink. Sarah couldn't understand his words, but his tone and the tight line of Running Cloud's jaw in response needed no translation. During one such rest, As the children huddled in the meager shade of a juniper, Swift Arrow approached Running Cloud, speaking in low, urgent tones. Though they conversed in Apache, Sarah caught her name mentioned more than once, and the glance Swift Arrow cast in her direction was cold enough to send a shiver down her spine despite the oppressive heat. When they resumed their journey, Running Cloud fell into step beside Sarah. "What did he say?" she asked quietly, adjusting Abigail on her hip. The child had grown heavy, but Sarah refused offers to set her down, fearing the toddler would wander too close to the steep drops that bordered parts of their path. Running Cloud's expression remained impassive. "He questions my judgment. It is nothing new." "He hates us," Sarah observed, not as a complaint, but as a simple statement of fact. "And not you specifically," Running Cloud replied after a moment's consideration. "What you represent to him. Swift Arrow's wife and infant son were killed by white settlers 3 summers ago. His hatred has deep roots." Sarah absorbed this information in silence, her heart aching for the man's loss, even as she feared his anger. "I'm sorry for his pain," she said finally. "But my children are innocent of those crimes. I know this," Running Cloud assured her. "That is why we travel to the cabin. There, you will be safe until I can arrange passage for you to a white settlement." "And you?" Sarah asked, finding the courage to voice the question that had been plaguing her since the council's decision. "What happens to you after we're gone?" Running Cloud's gaze remained fixed on the path ahead. "Adam, that will depend on many things. On whether your people forgive you for helping us," Sarah surmised. He glanced at her, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. "Yes, and on whether I can forgive myself for not doing more." The simple honesty of his answer struck her deeply. This man, who owed her nothing, had risked everything to save her family. In Boston, among her own kind, such selflessness would have been extraordinary. Here, from a man whose people had every reason to despise hers, it was nothing short of miraculous. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Save us. I mean, you could have ridden past, and no one would ever have known." Running Cloud was silent for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "I have seen too much death," he said. "Too many innocent lives ended by hatred and fear when I saw your children." He trailed off, then continued with careful precision. "My wife died in childbirth 2 winters ago, our son with her. Sometimes I wonder what he might have been like had he lived." The admission, so personal, so unexpected, left Sarah momentarily speechless. "I'm sorry," she managed finally. "I didn't know." "Few do," he replied. "But perhaps now you understand. Every child deserves a chance to grow, to become what they are meant to be, yours included." Before Sarah could respond, Swift Arrow gave a sharp cry from behind them. They turned to see him pointing toward the valley below, where a thin column of dust rose in the distance. "Riders," Running Cloud said grimly, "moving fast." "The soldiers?" Sarah asked, fear clutching at her heart. Running Cloud shook his head. "Soldiers travel together, in formation. These riders are spread out, moving like—" He hesitated. "Like men hunting something," Swift Arrow finished for him, having come up to join them. His eyes, when they met Sarah's, were cold with accusation. Or someone. "We must move quickly," Running Cloud decided. "The cabin is not far now, just beyond that ridge. We can reach it before sunset if we hurry." As they resumed their journey at a faster pace, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the dust cloud in the valley was somehow connected to them, and that Swift Arrow knew more than he was saying about who those riders might be. The cabin materialized before them as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. a simple structure of rough-hewn logs nestled against the base of a sandstone cliff. It was larger than Sarah had expected, with a small covered porch and windows shuttered against the elements. A narrow stream gurgled nearby, its banks lined with cottonwoods that provided blessed shade after their grueling journey. "We made it," Sarah breathed, relief washing over her as she set an exhausted Abigail down on the porch. The other children collapsed beside their sister, their faces streaked with dust and sweat. "Rest," Running Cloud instructed, handing Sarah the water skin. "I will check inside." He disappeared into the cabin, emerging moments later with a nod of approval. "It is empty. There is a fireplace, sleeping furs, some supplies." Swift Arrow remained at the edge of the clearing, his gaze fixed on the valley below, where the dust cloud had vanished behind a ridge. His posture was tense, like a predator scenting danger on the wind. "What troubles you?" Running Cloud asked him in Apache, moving to stand beside his fellow warrior. "Those riders," Swift Arrow replied in the same language. "I believe they are the bandits who attacked the settlers." Running Cloud's expression darkened. "How can you know this?" Swift Arrow hesitated, his scarred face inscrutable. 3 days ago, before you returned to camp, I was hunting in the western canyons. I saw men, white men, camped by the river. They had many horses, too many for honest travelers. And you did not think to mention this until now." Running Cloud's voice had a dangerous edge. Swift Arrow shrugged. "I thought they would move on. White bandits killing white settlers is not our concern." "It became our concern when I brought the survivors to our camp," Running Cloud pointed out, struggling to contain his anger. "If these are the same men who attacked Sarah's wagon train, they may be tracking her." "Why would they bother?" Swift Arrow countered. "There is nothing to gain." Running Cloud's eyes narrowed. "Unless they fear she can identify them, unless they left witnesses they did not intend to leave." A flicker of something, perhaps guilt, crossed Swift Arrow's face. "The woman and her children are your responsibility, not mine," he said finally. "I came only because Grey Wolf commanded it." "Then follow your commander's orders and help me protect them," Running Cloud replied, his tone making it clear that he would tolerate no argument. Inside the cabin, Sarah had settled her children on a pile of sleeping furs. James, ever vigilant, stood by the window, peering through a crack in the shutters at the 2 warriors outside. "They're arguing," he reported. "And I can't understand the words, but I can tell by their faces." "Come away from the window," Sarah told him gently. "It's not our business." "It is if they're arguing about us," James replied with the directness of youth. "Do you think those riders are looking for us, Mama?" Sarah hesitated, torn between honesty and the desire to protect her son from further fear. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "But we're safe here, with Running Cloud to protect us." "And the other one, Swift Arrow?" Emma asked, her small face solemn. "He doesn't like us. He doesn't know us," Sarah corrected. "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand." "I'm not afraid of him," James declared, though the slight tremor in his voice belied his brave words. Sarah smiled, drawing him close. "That's because you're very brave. Just like your father." The cabin door opened, and Running Cloud entered, followed by a reluctant Swift Arrow. The tension between them was palpable, though both men attempted to hide it for the children's sake. "We will stay here tonight," Running Cloud announced. "Tomorrow, I will scout the valley, see if those riders are still in the area." "And if they are?" Sarah asked quietly. Running Cloud's eyes met hers, steady and reassuring. "Then we will remain here until they are gone." Swift Arrow made a sound of disgust. "And the soldiers? Have you forgotten why we left the camp in the first place?" "I have forgotten nothing," Running Cloud replied evenly, "but we cannot return to camp with those riders nearby. It would risk leading them directly to our people." Swift Arrow could not argue with this logic, though his expression remained mutinous. He positioned himself by the door, rifle across his knees, his back pointedly turned to the McAllister family. As night fell, Running Cloud built a small fire in the stone hearth, careful to keep it low so that no light would escape through the shuttered windows. Sarah prepared a simple meal from their provisions, and they ate in relative silence, the children too exhausted for their usual chatter. After the meal, as the younger children drifted off to sleep, Running Cloud took James aside, presenting him with a small knife in a beaded sheath. "For protection," he explained, showing the boy how to hold it properly. "And for carving wood, making tools, a man should have a good knife." James accepted the gift with wide eyes, handling it with reverent care. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll use it well." Sarah watched the exchange from across the room, her heart constricting at the look of pride on her son's face. It had been too long since he'd had a man to look up to teach him the things his father should have taught him. Later, as Swift Arrow took the first watch and the children slept soundly on their furs, Running Cloud joined Sarah by the dying embers of the fire. "Those riders," she said without preamble. "You think they're the bandits, don't you?" Running Cloud nodded, seeing no point in deception. "It seems likely. Swift Arrow saw men with many horses camped nearby days ago." "And he didn't mention this until now?" Sarah asked, anger flashing in her eyes. "He did not think it important," Running Cloud replied, though his tone suggested he shared her frustration. Sarah was silent for a moment, processing this information. "What will happen if they find us here?" Running Cloud's hand moved instinctively to his tomahawk. "They will not take you again," he promised, his voice low and fierce. "Not while I draw breath." Dawn had barely brushed the eastern sky when Running Cloud silently slipped from the cabin, leaving Swift Arrow to guard the still sleeping McAllister family. The morning air was cool against his skin as he made his way up the ridge, moving with the practiced stealth of a lifetime spent hunting and tracking. At the crest, he lay flat against the earth, surveying the valley below with narrowed eyes. What he saw made his blood run cold. 6 riders, their horses tethered in a small copse of trees, were gathered around a morning fire. Even from this distance, Running Cloud could see weapons glinting in the early light, rifles, pistols, knives. One man, taller than the rest with a distinctive red bandana, was gesturing toward the hills, toward the very ridge where the cabin was hidden. They were being hunted, just as he had feared. Running Cloud retreated down the slope, his mind racing. The cabin was defensible, with thick log walls and only 2 entrances. But against 6 armed men, their chances were slim. They needed to move, to find a better position, or to slip away unseen while there was still time. He entered the cabin to find Sarah already awake, braiding Emma's hair with deft fingers while the other children ate a simple breakfast of dried fruit and flatbread. Swift Arrow stood by the window, his posture alert, his expression unreadable. "They're coming," Running Cloud said without preamble. 6 men armed, moving in this direction. Sarah's hands stilled in Emma's hair, but her voice remained steady when she spoke. "How long do we have?" "An hour, perhaps less," Running Cloud replied, impressed by her composure in the face of danger. Swift Arrow spat a curse in Apache. "I told you this would happen. Now they will find us, and then they will find our people." "Not if we lead them away from here," Running Cloud countered. "Sarah, gather your children. We need to move quickly." "Where will we go?" Sarah asked, already wrapping food in a cloth, her movements efficient despite the fear that must have been churning inside her. Running Cloud hesitated. "And there is a place. A hidden canyon with caves, half a day's journey from here. It is known only to our tribe. Swift Arrow straightened, his face darkening with anger. You would take whites to the sacred canyon. Have you lost all sense of what it means to be Apache? I would keep innocent children alive, Running Cloud replied, his patience wearing thin. Unless you have a better suggestion. For a moment, it seemed Swift Arrow might continue to argue, but something shifted in his expression, a realization, perhaps, or a decision made. There is another way, he said finally. I will lead the bandits away from here. You take the woman and her children to the canyon. Running Cloud stared at his fellow warrior in disbelief. Udichin, that would be suicide. Swift Arrow's scarred face twisted in what might have been a smile. Not if I am clever, and I am very clever. He checked his rifle, then moved toward the door. Give me an hour's head start, then head northeast. Stay off the main ridges where you might be seen. Why? Running Cloud asked, voicing the question that hung in the air between them. You have made it clear you do not care what happens to these people. Swift Arrow paused, his hand on the door latch. I care what happens to our tribe, he replied. And I have seen the way you look at this woman. If you die protecting her, our people lose a great warrior. His eyes, when they met Running Cloud's, held a grudging respect. Besides, I have my own scores to settle with white men. These bandits will do as well as any. Before Running Cloud could respond, Swift Arrow was gone, slipping out the door and into the brightening day. Will he betray us? Sarah asked quietly, coming to stand beside Running Cloud. No, he replied, surprising himself with his certainty. Whatever else he may be, Swift Arrow is a man of his word. They waited the agreed-upon hour, the children huddled close to their mother, sensing the tension though not fully understanding its cause. James kept his new knife close at hand, his young face set in determined lines. When it was time to leave, Running Cloud led them out the back of the cabin, away from the valley where the bandits had been camped. They moved swiftly but cautiously, keeping to the cover of rocks and trees whenever possible. Abigail, too young to keep pace, was carried by Running Cloud, her small arms wrapped trustingly around his neck. They had been traveling for perhaps 2 hours when the sound of distant gunfire reached them, sharp cracks that echoed off the canyon walls. Running Cloud halted, listening intently. 3 shots, then 2 more, then silence. A Swift Arrow? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Running Cloud nodded grimly. We must hurry. They pushed on, the terrain growing increasingly rugged as they approached the sacred canyon. The children, sensing the urgency of their flight, did not complain despite their obvious fatigue. Even Emma, whose feet were blistered and raw, kept pace with stoic determination that would have made any Apache proud. It was mid-afternoon when they finally reached the entrance to the canyon, a narrow cleft in the rock face that was easily missed unless one knew exactly where to look. Running Cloud ushered them through, and they emerged into a hidden world, a sheltered valley with a small stream, cottonwood trees, and caves carved into the sandstone walls. We'll be safe here, Running Cloud assured them, settling Abigail gently on a patch of soft grass. The bandits will never find this place. Sarah sank down beside her youngest child, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. And Swift Arrow? Running Cloud's expression was solemn. He knew the risk he was taking. They made camp in one of the smaller caves, its entrance partially hidden by a curtain of hanging vines. Running Cloud built a small fire, and Sarah prepared a meager meal from their dwindling supplies. The children, despite their ordeal, soon recovered their spirits in this new, almost magical setting, exploring the cave and splashing in the shallow edges of the stream. As night fell and the children drifted off to sleep, Sarah and Running Cloud sat side by side at the mouth of the cave, watching the stars emerge in the velvet sky. "What happens now?" Sarah asked softly. "If the soldiers are still near your village, I will return to my people tomorrow," Running Cloud replied. "I must know what has happened in our absence." Sarah nodded, though he could see the fear that flickered across her face at the thought of his departure. "And if they demand you choose between us and your tribe?" Running Cloud was silent for a long moment, weighing the enormity of the decision that had been haunting him since the council meeting. "Among my people," he said finally, "a warrior's worth is measured not just by his courage in battle, but by his ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I have lost one family already. I do not wish to lose another." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that there are many paths a warrior can walk," Running Cloud answered. "The elders speak of following the traditional ways, but even they must acknowledge that the world is changing around us. Perhaps there is a new path to be forged." "With us?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Running Cloud reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "If you would have me." Before she could respond, a sound at the canyon entrance made them both tense. Running Cloud was on his feet in an instant, tomahawk in hand, positioning himself between Sarah and the potential threat. But it was not bandits who emerged from the shadows. It was Grey Wolf, accompanied by two younger warriors, and behind them, limping but very much alive, Swift Arrow. "Elder," Running Cloud greeted Grey Wolf, surprise evident in his voice. "How did you find us?" "Swift Arrow led us here," Grey Wolf replied, his weathered face betraying little emotion. "After he led the bandits away from you and into our hunting party." Understanding dawned on Running Cloud's face. "You knew about the bandits. We have been tracking them since they entered our territory," Grey Wolf confirmed. "When Swift Arrow found us and told us of your situation, we set a trap. Those men will trouble no one ever again." Sarah had come to stand beside Running Cloud, her shoulder nearly touching his. "Thank you," she said simply, addressing both Grey Wolf and Swift Arrow. Swift Arrow's response was a curt nod, but there was less hostility in his eyes than before. "The soldiers are gone as well," Grey Wolf continued. "They came seeking signatures on a new treaty. When we refused, they threatened to return with more men." A grim smile touched his lips. "But that is a problem for another day." "And the council's decision?" Running Cloud asked, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Regarding Sarah and her children." Grey Wolf's gaze moved from Running Cloud to Sarah, then to the cave where her children slept peacefully. "The council remains divided," he admitted, "but Morning Sky has spoken strongly in your favor. She says the spirits have shown her that these people are meant to be under our protection. And you, Elder." Running Cloud pressed. "What do you say?" Grey Wolf was silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to look beyond the present moment into some distant future that only he could see. "I say that our people have survived by adapting to changing times," he replied finally. "Perhaps this is one such change we must embrace." He stepped forward, addressing Sarah directly. "There is a place at the edge of our territory, where the land is still good but rarely visited by either whites or Apache. Running Cloud knows it. If you were to settle there, with him as your protector and guide, the council would not object." Sarah's eyes widened with surprise. "You would allow this?" "It is not a perfect solution," Grey Wolf cautioned. "There will be those among my people who disapprove, just as there will be whites who condemn you for living with an Apache. The path you choose will not be easy." Few worthwhile paths are, Sarah replied softly, her gaze meeting Running Cloud's. Swift Arrow, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. I still think you are both fools, he declared bluntly, but I have seen how fiercely you protect these children, Running Cloud. And I have seen how they look at you, not with fear, but with trust, he gestured to Sarah. This woman stood ready to defend her young even against hopeless odds. There is courage in that which even I must respect. Coming from Swift Arrow, this grudging acknowledgement was as good as a blessing. Running Cloud inclined his head in thanks, understanding the significance of the moment. Then it is decided, Grey Wolf announced. When the children are rested, Running Cloud will guide you to your new home. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at them. The world is changing, whether we wish it to or not. Perhaps in this small way, we can shape that change rather than simply endure it. With that, he and his warriors departed, leaving Running Cloud and Sarah standing together at the entrance to the cave, the starlight casting its silver glow over the canyon. A new path, Sarah murmured, echoing his earlier words. For all of us. Running Cloud took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that bridged two worlds. For all of us, he agreed. Inside the cave, James stirred in his sleep, his hand still clutching the knife Running Cloud had given him. Emma and Daniel slept peacefully side by side, while little Abigail's thumb had found its way to her mouth, as it always did in slumber. They were no longer simply survivors of a tragedy, but the beginning of something new, a family forged in the crucible of danger and protected by a love that defied boundaries of blood and culture. As the night deepened around them, Running Cloud and Sarah remained at the cave's entrance, their silhouettes outlined against the star-filled sky. Two figures from different worlds who had found, against all odds, a common ground on which to build a future. Together,